Welcome back, traders and investors. We have Stephen G. Blum on the line here. He has got a new book, Negotiating Your Investments, using proven negotiation methods to enrich your financial life. He has also been teaching at Wharton for 21 years. Stephen, how you doing today?
Well, I'm good. How are you?
We're doing good. It's a little bit of a slow Friday here, but we're really glad to have you on the show here. Looking at your book here, you talk about being an expert negotiator. You work with corporations, individuals, and nonprofits. So, wow, what a spectrum to cover here. Do you have to have a different approach for each of these, or do you have a standard way to negotiate that works across all these different corporations, individuals, and nonprofits?
Well, I think the basics of negotiation are the same. And then, as you're dealing with a specific situation, you tailor it and you customize it to, to take into account the specifics. But let's start with the idea that there are some basic concepts of negotiation that cover just about any situation.
Really? Okay. So, what's your favorite? Is it corporations, individuals, or nonprofits?
Well, what's my favorite? I think they're all very interesting to work on, and I appreciate them all.
Okay.
Also, it's not always clear that the one is so different from the other or that they don't bleed together. For instance, I work with a guy who's a dean of a medical school. Now, technically, that's a nonprofit, but big money issues are on the line every day.
Okay. So, when you go on with like individuals, I mean, are you just talking about people that like trying to negotiate with their wife or trying to negotiate deals? I mean, where are you dealing with higher ups and corporations? Who are some of your individual clients?
Well, it's all of the above. In that the concepts of negotiation, the idea is that they're applicable to all the different situations. So, I might be working with an individual who's a CEO of a company, and obviously I'm getting paid to work with them on a deal. But in the course of going out to a meal and talking, you might start talking about their relationship with their kids, and you might find that some of the negotiation concepts are very applicable to those conflicts or those bargaining sessions as well.
So that's a great point. We don't talk about it, I think, enough here is personal finance. A lot of the new traders, learning to save and learning to negotiate, I guess, your investments is very important to figure out how to save up enough to actually get to investment in trading and personal finance being that important. Stephen, your blog is called Negotiating Truth. What do you think are some, or what do you have you found are some of the key points when negotiating?
Well, let me start by saying this. I've been teaching negotiation at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania for 21 years. And before that, I was a graduate student at the Harvard program on negotiation. So those are the ways I think about negotiation are the way I was taught it and the way I teach it, which are the same, let's say, are very highly related. So there's in thinking about negotiation, it's a broader concept than most people think. A lot of the things we do in the course of our lives are negotiation, but negotiators do a series of things. They break negotiation down into, as I suggest in the book, 7 elements and 4 different phases. So we got time to go over those real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. 7 elements of negotiation. The first one is alternatives. What can you do if you don't do this deal? And let's put that one aside and come back to it. The next one is interest. So what do you really, really want? What do the other folks really, really want? What are you trying to do? The third element, options, and not to be confused with stock options, but options is the idea of there's many different ways to put the deal together, and which are the better of those ways? Which are going to meet the interests of everybody the best? The fourth element I would call outside measures of fairness. Nobody wants an unfair deal. Well, how do you measure fairness? So there's a series of ways to think about that. The fifth is communication, and how are you communicating? The sixth is relationships. and what are the relationships between the people in a negotiation, and what could they be? What is their potential? And the seventh is commitment, and this question of, are people really bound into the deal? Are there incentives in place so they'll really keep their word, do what they promised? So that's 7 elements of any negotiation. And let me go back, though, for a minute to alternatives, the first one, because I think it's particularly relevant to investors. So any good negotiator is going to ask themselves the question from the very beginning, if this deal falls apart, what else can I do? And it turns out that the negotiator who has a very strong answer to that, who has an alternative that's almost as good as this deal, they're the ones with the power. That's where power comes from in a negotiation. They're in a very strong position. But the one who says, well, if this deal falls apart, I'm in big trouble, I really need this deal, they're in a weaker position. So let me pause there and say that's a kind of an overview of those elements that one thinks about when one negotiates.
Okay, and what would be the most common mistake you think people make when negotiating? Besides the obvious one, taking too hard of a stance, what do you think's the most common mistake people make?
Well, I think not knowing what their best alternative is, not fully understanding what they're going to do if they don't take this deal, that's a big one. Another one is not thinking hard about the other side. What is the other side trying to do? What do they want? What are their underlying interests? And I'm going to say the third, I think, is issues of communication and miscommunication and misunderstanding. Finding ways to be sure everybody understands each other clearly is, well, I must say, worth its weight in gold in a negotiation.
Yeah, that's one interesting thing that you mentioned here, and applying this to the trading world about trying to get in the mind of the other person, and we see a lot of moves in the market, and this is specifically for our traders, and there, and I look at it from the position, if a stock has a big drop, okay, just an enormous drop, and I see some support, I would think, man, if I was lucky enough to short this stock, I'd be covering here. I'd be buying. And then you look at it from that way. I mean, sometimes it works out in your favor, but I think not only in negotiating, but in life, in trading, always take the other side of the trade when you're doing something. Think about that perspective. Do you do anything with politicians at all, as part of the individuals? Because to me, political negotiating is, would be right up there at the top.
No, I don't work with politicians. I work with an awful lot of investors, though, and you were talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just suggest that one of the main ideas of this book, and one of the reasons I put it out there, is my deep belief that if an investor will do all the things that we teach negotiators to do at Wharton, and that includes preparation, getting ready, thinking about the other side, gathering information, knowing what their alternatives are, that when applied to investing, these concepts are very, very helpful and will be worth a lot of money.
Okay, all right. We have Stephen G. Blum on here, author of Negotiating Your Investments. You've proven negotiations methods to enrich your financial life. Dealing with a big cross section of people here, I'm sure of all ages. Do you have to take different approach for different age levels?
Well, of course you do, in the sense that you always want to be, in any negotiation, you want to be spending a tremendous amount of time and energy thinking about who the other person is, what their motivations are, what they're thinking about, and what they want, what they need, what are their real interests. So those are going to be different from people of different age groups. But you want to keep those concepts and that framework in mind for anybody, from kids to the elderly. I have two fairly young kids, 11 and 7, and I like to say that I spend an awful lot of time negotiating with them.
Hey, do you ever win?
Well, that's a good question. Why don't we take the word win out of our vocabulary and say, do we reach good outcomes? Do we reach outcomes that everybody's happy and satisfied with? And the answer is, yeah, sometimes, sure.
Maybe they could read your book and get some tips how to negotiate with Pop there. But
Well, that's a
no,
good
that
idea. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no. Okay, so you got to just final tips. I mean, I also notice here that you have nonprofits on there. Nonprofit organizations. What are they trying to negotiate? Donations or terms or for for contracts or
Well, as I suggested earlier, nonprofit organizations have almost all of the same challenges, concerns as for-profits, and so they might be negotiating their rent, or they might be dealing with the IRS because they still have to do that, or frankly, they might be trying to decide how to make money because nonprofits are also very concerned with the accumulation of the money they need to fulfill their missions. You know, as I said, I teach at the University of Pennsylvania at the Wharton School. That's a nonprofit, and it's a multi-million-dollar business.
Yeah, those schools are top. Okay, we've had Stephen G. Blum on here, author of a book, Negotiating Your Investments, Use Proven Negotiation Methods to Enrich Your Financial Life. Stephen, thanks a lot for coming on Benzinga's Pre-Market Prep, brought to you by Options House. Have a good day, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.